Rushanara Ali.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I've called this debate to highlight the grave danger facing thousands of people living in privately owned high-rise blocks in my constituency.
Order. We cannot have the sort of leftover of the last debate getting in the way of the Honourable Lady's speech. It's important that she should be heard. Rushanara Ali.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I've called this debate to highlight the grave danger facing thousands of people living in privately owned high-rise blocks in my constituency and up and down the country. I'm referring, of course, to the presence of aluminium composite material, or ACM cladding, on tower blocks that are owned by private companies, not council or housing associations. The danger is real and deeply worrying, but can easily be alleviated if ministers decide to take action. I hope that in his remarks, the Minister sets out today a firm plan of action with a clear set of deadlines to put the situation right. It is unlikely that many of us would have been aware or known what ACM cladding exactly is, were it not for the terrible tragedy of the Grenfell Tower fire disaster. On the terrible night of the 14th of June 2017, 72 people lost their lives and many more were injured, lost their homes and suffered a trauma they carry with them and are likely to carry with them for the rest of their lives. It was a trauma that was shared by the whole nation that watched this needless tragedy. It is clear that ACM cladding contributed to the speed with which the fire spread up and down the building and contributed to the loss of life. This was an avoidable man-made disaster. Shockingly, the nation then discovered this kind of cladding and similar flammable cladding is present on hundreds of blocks around the country and other buildings around the country. In the immediate aftermath, ministers promised swift action to replace ACM and other flammable materials from high-rise blocks. But instead, what we've seen is unacceptably slow progress, and 22 months later, 345 high-rise buildings with ACM panels are yet to be made safe. I'll give way to the Honourable Member.
Thank the Honourable Lady for giving way and congratulate her on bringing this issue to the House. It's been one that's taxed the emotion and the interest of this House over a period of time. Does the Honourable Lady not agree that it's imperative that the cladding is removed quickly where it is still there and that there's a need for a government-aided scheme? It's good to see the Minister in his place. We all are very appreciative of the Minister and we look forward to his response. That a government-aided scheme would ensure that owners do the right thing and that we all see the prevention of another Grenfell tragedy. And that has to be our goal. And just to say to the Honourable Lady, she's another 2.5 hours to go. Well done.
Well, I thank the Honourable Member for his contribution, and I very much hope that the Minister will say something concrete about legislation and other steps that he and his government will take to rectify this appalling problem. Because it is deeply worrying for families living in those blocks. It's causing huge amounts of anxiety, fear and insecurity. Many of my constituents have raised serious concerns. One of them said, "We are trapped with crippling fire warden charges and have an unsaleable flat. My wife is now taking antidepressants." The UK Cladding Action Group, established by residents in these unsafe blocks, ran a survey showing the impact on mental health on these residents. 88% stated, Madam Deputy Speaker, that their mental health was worse than before. One resident said, "I feel as though I could burn alive at any minute. I live in constant fear. My physical and mental health has taken a huge impact. My financial situation is unbearable. I cannot sell my property or remortgage. I'm stuck in a nightmare." Another said, "The massive £18,500 charge bestowed upon me is completely unpayable in my current financial situation. I have put everything on hold in the hope of a solution to present itself, but currently nothing." Another said, "I was made redundant and can't get a loan, can't remortgage or sell my property. I feel trapped and the anxiety of this is affecting me getting another job." Another said, the constant stress and worry has destroyed the relationship with my long-term partner, and as a result, we have terminated our relationship. She could not handle living in a building that could kill us. Another said, the financial stress and feeling unsafe in my own home is taking a huge toll on our lives. We are also getting married in 2 months, and this huge cladding bill has overridden everything. We want to move so we can start a family, but are unable to as the flat is not sellable, and we can't raise a family in such a flammable building. Others have listed many examples of struggle and trauma. Another resident said, my partner and I need to sell our property to buy a bigger place because I'm pregnant and expecting our first child in 1 month. However, we have been unable to do this due to the cladding. This has caused immense amounts of anxiety and stress. We have also had to put our wedding plans on hold. Another said, I can't sleep very well. I think about my unsafe property daily. I can't believe that I bought it in good faith, thinking I'd live in a safe and happy home. I'm stressed every day. Others talked about their health issues. One resident said, I suffer from an autoimmune condition. Stress and working long hours can make the symptoms worse. This is a stressful situation as I feel. I may not be able to sell or remortgage my property, and now I'm not only worried about my family's safety, I'm worried about our financial security. So now I'm working harder than ever. Another said, my boyfriend has moved to Italy without me as I cannot sell my flat. I have had to take a second job as I'm unable to sell the property and release capital. Madam Deputy Speaker, another of these residents said, this has been the worst 21 years of my life. I'm struggling to get through each day. Gone is the enjoyment of life. There are hundreds of these testimonies, and I've just highlighted some of those experiences and the anxiety and fear, as well as the devastation that living in ACM-cladded properties has caused for people up and down the country, as well as in my own constituency. On the 8th of May, the UK Cladding Action Group will host a meeting to share their findings and their concerns, and I hope the Minister will be able to join us at this very important meeting, and I hope members across the House will join the residents who will be attending that meeting. I'll give way to my...
I thank the Honourable Member for giving way. Does she share my anxiety for those leaseholders who, even when the freeholder has done the right thing and removed the cladding, are left in a negative equity situation where their value in their flat is actually worth less than the bill that is hanging over their head for the removal of the cladding?
Absolutely, I fully agree, because the leaseholders bought the property in good faith. They didn't know that these blocks had ACM cladding. If anyone's responsible, it is the government, because the ACM cladding should never have been used. It was dangerous, and that's why it's important that the government deals with this issue to protect people from this predicament. I give way to the Honourable.
Thank the member for giving way, and just on that very point, a lot of the retrofit that took place with this type of cladding was to actually comply with EU regulation in relation to energy efficiency on those buildings, and as a consequence they have fallen into the loophole of actually having to attain what is an energy efficiency certificate for a building and comply with legal legislation associated with that, but unfortunately without having the safeguard of putting in something which actually met with all fire regulations and complied accordingly.
I thank the Honourable Member for his comments. He's weaved in the European perspective, but what I would say to him is that fundamentally the duty of care is with our government of whichever political colour. And there was nothing to stop the government to make sure that flammable cladding was not what was used. So to revert to blaming the EU is frankly unhelpful and not in the spirit of the purpose of this debate, which is about how we protect our citizens in this country and how we learn from what has happened in terms of the failure of regulation in our country to protect people in the future and to deal with what's happening now with those who have cladding, dangerous cladding covering their blocks of flats. Madam Deputy Speaker, last summer, after vociferous campaigning, ministers announced £400 million of funding for urgent fire safety repairs in social housing blocks that are at risk. This is welcome, but it didn't come easy. The Grenfell survivors, having been through the most horrific trauma campaign with charities, with local authorities and members of parliament, we had to fight tooth and nail to get this funding, to secure this funding, and it took a year. It shouldn't have taken so long. The government should have done it immediately. Now we have to fight tooth and nail for a similar pledge for people to be protected in privately owned blocks. I hope the Minister will say something positive today about additional funding, because it's gone on for 2 years and it shouldn't be like that. Of the 345 buildings I mentioned awaiting repairs, 226 are in private hands, and ministers have done too little to make them safe. Of course, fire does not discriminate between private or public ownership. There is no logic in safeguarding social housing while ignoring private housing. Ministers have said they expect private building owners to pay for these measures, although this has been backed only by an appeal to their goodwill and good nature rather than stipulating through legislation. The government should make this a legal requirement. Where repairs are being carried out, some private owners, as the Minister is fully aware, are passing on the costs to the people living in the flats as a service charge under the terms of their leases. This can amount to thousands of pounds, and this is simply unacceptable. As we know, some freeholders, owners of these blocks, are often in the shadows, obscured by front companies, and under data protection rules they can remain anonymous because of the risk of arson. So if there is no law to compel freeholders and no public scrutiny, it is hardly surprising that many will fail to act. In January, the Minister said that he could guarantee people in high-rise flats with ACM cladding were safe to sleep at night. For thousands living in flats in high-rise buildings, encased in cladding, which could spread fire with rapacious speed, they do not feel safe. And there are no good night's sleep. The sleepless nights will continue until ministers get a grip and move fast to take down the cladding. My local authority, Tower Hamlets, has among the highest number of blocks with dangerous ACM cladding in the country. 41 are privately owned blocks and 9 are social housing blocks. Victoria Wharf, which has been in the press in my constituency, has ACM cladding like the cladding at Grenfell. Residents have been charged nearly £7,000 per flat for temporary safety measures such as 24-hour fire wardens. They are very concerned that no real action has been taken yet, despite the dangers being well known. The freeholder is Bulliard Holdings, which is registered offshore. There are currently no legal means to force the owners to meet their obligations. And if there are any, it's not affordable to my constituents. So perhaps the government could take the legal action against these companies if they are not prepared to legislate to make them pay. Again and again, when ministers have heard the anguished cries of people in this situation, they are offered no solace. Indeed, the Minister for Housing told the Housing and Communities and Local Government Select Committee, "I'm sorry to be opaque about it," when pressed on making funding available for private ACM-clad blocks. I'm sorry too, but this evening, instead of being opaque, I hope he will be transparent and demonstrate the urgency of the matter by announcing practical action backed by resources. Specifically, can I ask the Minister to address the following? Will his department commit to creating a new national funding for the removal of dangerous cladding from private blocks, either administered by national or local government? This would mean the works can start straight away. It must be additional funding given the crisis in local government funding. Will he agree a series of deadlines along a clear timeline to remove all dangerous cladding? Will he amend legislation, existing legislation, to force freeholders to pay for repairs? I hope we are about to hear an action plan on these important issues, making money available now, setting a timetable and making freeholders pay. In last year's budget, the Chancellor made £420 million of extra funding available to fix potholes. Don't get me wrong, fixing potholes is important. I tripped on a pothole myself and had an injury, so of course it's important. But, Mr. Deputy Speaker, this issue is a matter of life and death for thousands of people up and down the country, and for many in my constituency and the constituencies of members across the House. It needs urgent action. After Grenfell, the Prime Minister said, "My government will do whatever it takes to keep our people safe." 2 years on, her government has completely failed to honour that commitment, even when people are living in utter fear and despair for their safety and their families' safety and are trapped in these properties without any end in sight. In fact, I would go as far as saying if one more fatality like Grenfell occurs in a block with ACM cladding because of this government's failure to act, then this government is absolutely liable and it will have blood on its hands if it doesn't take action and some other disaster happens.